the stripper deadlift. What's going on and how do we fix it? So to do this, we need to first understand what's going on in the deadlift. There's three components to the deadlift. There's knee extension, which is done by the quads. There's hip anchoring and hip extension, which is done by the posterior chain, which is the hamstrings, the glutes, and the adductors. And then there is the isometric contraction of the lumbar and thoracic extension by the back being held in its anatomical position by the erector spinae group. So now what happens in the deadlift? The quads will initiate the force production, which will start the chain events of the kinetic chain, and the bar will start to come off the floor. All while the hamstrings is maintaining a constant back angle. How is it maintaining constant back angle? By their anchoring the pelvis in its proximal connection to the pelvis on the ischium, and the glutes on the ilium, right? By maintaining that pelvis, that pelvic angle, which is maintaining that back angle, which is being held in a nice, rigid, strong isometric contraction by the erectors. Okay, so we'll see that there's actually two phases that the hamstrings, that the posterior chain go through. The first phase is an anchoring of the pelvis until the bar gets to around the knee, depending on the anthropometry of the person, either a little bit before or on. And then there's the second phase where the posterior chain will take on their traditional role of hip extension, which is opening up the hips, allowing you to get into lockout. Okay, so now that's what happens in the deadlift. What's happening in the stripper deadlift? The problem with the stripper deadlift is that while we see the quads engaging, because we do see that the knees extend, we see that the angle, which was a little bit closed, opens up and the knees shoot back, but the hips don't extend, right? The hips don't extend. What ends up happening is the hips raise and then the torso goes forward of the bar. And then when he wants to pull the bar, he can't, because the onus of all that weight is actually on the hip musculature. He can't engage his glutes enough to help him to pick it up the ground. And if it's light, he'll pick it up. It won't be on. He won't be picking it up in a straight line. It'll be in front of his in front of his shins. It'll be a very inefficient lift. This is happening because in that first phase of the hamstring job, which we said before, that the first phase of the hamstring job is to anchor the back angle, right? It's to anchor that that setup angle until the bar is high enough that he can now engage the hip extension and do the proper hip extension. So it's a failure of engaging the hamstrings to anchor the pelvis at the proximal attachment on the ischium, keeping it nice, keeping it in that nice constant angle that was originally on, right? In that failure, created an imbalance in the system, which put him into a mechanical disadvantage. So, in order to fix this, we have to figure out a way how to engage the posterior chain to do their anchoring at that first phase, which will then allow them to do the extension of the hips on that second phase. Okay, so there's two things that we can do. There's one thing which Ripperto brings in the Blue Testament, which that is to get your lifter to think about his hamstrings, think about his glutes, like make him to proprioceptively be aware of them. Yeah, maybe even like pull the bar, like pull the bar towards the towards the shin, engaging the lats. But there's an idea of proprioception awareness of getting aware of the hamstrings and the glutes and what they're supposed to do, to contract them, get them involved. But I heard another explanation, which I heard from Nick D'Agostino, which he said, when you have a lifter that has this problem, tell him to stick his knees forward as much as possible for as long as he can in the lift, right? What he's doing is he's pushing his knees out for as long as he can while he's pulling the bar up, right? So through pushing the knees forward, the secondary effect is engaging the hamstrings, engaging the posterior chain in that first phase job, which is the anchoring of the pelvis, which is the anchoring of the back angle to be constant until the bar gets to around the knees, right? Which at that phase the posterior chain will go into the extension. We'll go into the hip extension phase. Okay, I hope this helps. So sei gesund und stark.